Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the online event This Humid House Appropriating Nature for Pleasure. This event is presented by the Design Singapore Council in partnership with This Humid House and supported by Gardens by the Bay and the National Design Centre. It is also part of the National Design Centre's Casting Hope program lineup for April and May this year. Today's event accompanies the ongoing exhibition, Garden Dreaming, at the National Design Centre, which showcases the development and hopes for Singapore as a city in nature. Narrated through a series of interviews with key figures shaping Singapore's architecture and urbanscapes, the exhibition explores how innovation is happening in landscaping and urban greening locally and encourages us to consider our very own garden dreams for the future. Further exploring the design potential of local flora, today's event will feature John Lim and his team from This Humid House, an award-winning botanical design studio. John is the founder of This Humid House and will be coming to you live from within the Garden Dreaming exhibition. The studio will share about their design approach and works, the phenomena called plant blindness, and the inspiration behind This Humid House's feature installation in Garden Dreaming. And you will get to witness the construction of this installation live as part of this event. And with that, let us now welcome John on screen. John, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm John. I'm the founder of This Humid House. And come on. And here's my team of senior designers. We have Francoise, there's Carol, and then there's Karina. In front of us are some lovely ingredients gathered from all over the place. And we would like to thank Gardens by the Bay for donating some of this wonderful material that we have to work with today. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to talk about what you see here on the wall of expanded mesh, so the team can get started. We have used the curvy branches from a fallen plumeria tree, it's commonly known as frangipani, to make a nest or base from which the team will add material to. Why are we called This Humid House? That's a question I get the most, actually. And well, Singapore, as you know, is hot and humid. It's not always the most comfortable place, but we're trying to make the best of it. We're trying to make beautiful things inspired by and in spite of the heat. So we have a focus on material that thrives in this climate. Next slide. And I'd like to begin my presentation with this quote from the poet Mary Oliver. "Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight." And I really like this quote because it captures the essence of why we do what we do. I think everyone in my team has an emotional connection with nature. And I want to encourage all of you to develop your own relationship with the natural world. The larger aim of our sharing today is really to highlight an awareness, I would say, so that there will be a greater consciousness in protecting and conserving all the amazing stuff around us. Okay, so about a year ago in lockdown is when we started our own garden. And it started off as something that was just an experimental garden, but it's something that made our team incredibly hopeful in a very dark period. And what started off as experimental is now producing at least 20% of what we use in all our products. And this is something that we are incredibly proud of. We have begun a program to actively acquire new material to cultivate, grow, and use for our work. What we try to do is really challenge the perception of what using tropical material might look like. So what you see on this slide is an arrangement of largely tropical material, but without overt signifiers like monstera leaves or birds of paradise. However, the inspiration of this arrangement is actually the bird of paradise, the bird. And what you see are these two pieces of Asahi palm fruit that form the sweeping lines that take on the appearance of a bird in flight. But we also don't want to be dogmatic about what we use. So it's not strictly limited to what's tropical. We use material from all over. And in fact, a lot of the material that you see here is tropical, subtropical, and temperate. On the right is an arrangement in reddish and sunset hues. And we really wanted to play with texture. You see a heliconia here that is perhaps a familiar tropical shape, but it's also Heliconia villageraria, which is slightly hairy. Its common name is Heliconia shikong, which I really love. You know, when we talk about our work as a team, we talk about form, volume, color, line, texture, and movement, which is really the same words that you'd use to describe sculpture. And this is exactly it. I think we really take this very seriously and think about what we do as art. So a lot of our wedding clients specifically ask, can we do this or can we do that? And my response is, it's your wedding, you can do whatever you want. And for example, if it's your wedding, you can put turmeric or any kind of spice on the table, which is what you see here. On the table are these piles of turmeric. And we really love the color of turmeric, which is very similar to marigold. Actually, we were trying to find a substitute for marigold and arrived at turmeric. The saturation brings such intensity to the table, and you only need a little bit of it to really make a punch. We do a lot of weddings, and I think we are very aware that there's an aspect of our work that is anthropological. When our work is involved in a client's wedding or celebration, it's personal. It becomes a part of their personal history, but it's also part of a larger conversation about the relationship between plants and culture. So going back to this image, this is really about creating a hanging cacophony of lightness and joy. So some of you might recognize this image. It's one of the most enduring images that have come out of our studio. This is actually for the wedding of a client who preferred greens over flowers. And in order to develop richness, we really focus on combining an incredible variety of textural greens and subtle whites. Some of our clients get a bit nervous when we introduce the idea of an installation that's not full all the way through. But as you can see here, the strategic voids and gaps within the installation are just as important as the areas of fullness. And on the right here is another stair installation. We really love the challenge of designing an installation around stairs because whatever we create really needs to respond to the architecture of the stair. On the right, something that might read a little bit more tropical, but it's also a touch of whimsy with the addition of vines and the pond of aquatic plants that's at the base of the stair. And this is another enduring image from our studio, a kind of a swirling mass of heliconia that look like they have teeth. It looks like a scene from Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. And it's swirling around a mound of lotus roots, and we've cut the roots specifically to show that beautiful section that is so interesting and unique. And we were very insistent on getting lotus roots right out of the mud, and that's what you see kind of slathered on the roots. Next slide. And here you see yam roots, which we intentionally propped up, kind of precariously. It kind of takes an anthropomorphic shape, and it's surrounded by purple mushrooms that we dyed with purple vanda orchids. And this is really a great example of what we strive to do with looking at our work as sculpture or art. Something a little more expansive. This is an installation of clusia in vessels. And clusia is actually a very prevalent around the coastal regions of Singapore. It loves mangrove or coastal areas. And this we paired with Oncidium orchids. And we really try to create like a movement, left to right, right to left, that depicted dynamism and flow. And we've included this installation because we wanted to talk about, we use this as a platform to talk about what we're going to do here today, which is a wall installation. This is also another wall sculpture that we made. And so the structure is actually made from a live plant in a pot that we then draped around and a wall, and then tied together in certain places for structural integrity. And what you see is a combination of seaweed and various like flowers that, like sandpaper vine, Petra volubilis, and also filica, which we use for kind of softness. And it was very important to us that this sculpture levitated off the ground as though it was floating. As you can see, we love using unconventional material like seaweed, and I think this really delighted our clients. And here's a hanging installation, and if you look, I'm not sure if you can see here, but the large bulk of this installation is from white Bougainvillea, and white Bougainvillea is something that we see all around. We try to make it feel a little bit more special by taking the time to strip it of all its leaves. A lot of florists ask us how we're able to use Bougainvillea because it doesn't really survive as a cut flower. What we do is we actually bag the root balls and use them in installations, and we actually nurture them back to health again so that they can be reused in future installations. Okay, I'm going to talk about plant blindness. What is plant blindness? And I think plant blindness is something that us as Singaporeans especially suffer from. And it's really only because of the incredible abundance of greenness that surrounds us. We're so spoiled that we're almost immune or desensitized to what's around us. And I would really like to encourage everyone to develop curiosity around the plants that they see, and develop a sensitivity to what they're actually drawn to. And this is how I was sensitized to what was around us. I identified qualities that interested me, and I have to recommend a book. One second. This is my very old copy of 1001 Plants in Singapore. It's published by the National Parks Board, and it really is, in some ways, has been my Bible. Whenever I see something I like, I try to find it in here. If not, I try to do a bit of research. And this has been incredibly helpful on my journey in understanding what's around us. So this is a clip of our installation last year at the Esplanade, Sayang Sayang. It's an installation of bouncing palm leaves. And I like to talk about this installation with reference to plant blindness. In Singapore, we're so spoiled by the variety of palms around us. And some of these palms we don't even realize are just completely massive. And the real aim here of this installation, or part of the aim of the installation, was to really bring these ginormous leaves into an interior environment so that people could understand the scale and majesty of these leaves. Today's installation is inspired by epiphytic communities, and the specific reason why we're doing this is really to get people to look up from your phones, our phones. If you've rode anywhere from the airport into Singapore, you'll see rows like this row of rain trees with thousands of bird's nest ferns in the elbow pits of these rain trees. It's an incredibly majestic scene, and it never fails to instill a sense of wonder and appreciation of the natural world. This is also another book that I'd like to plug. It's a guide to the common epiphytes and mistletoes of Singapore. I believe there's a more updated edition. This is spectacular, and if you ever needed to identify or know the names of anything that you see on these trees, this is the perfect book for you. Okay. What I'd really like to emphasize is articulating, or in a way forcing yourself to identify why you're drawn to certain things. And this has been incredibly helpful for me. In articulating why I've been drawn to something, I've been able to identify the qualities that I've been drawn to. And I think this has really deepened my understanding of why I like what I like and what I like, and a point of view. Today, we are so pleased to have Narelle from Design Singapore joining us as we create this installation. And she's also here to take your questions. Narelle is the curator of the Garden Dreaming exhibition right here at the National Design Center. Narelle.
Hi, John.
Hello, hi.
Hi, I've been sitting back here listening to your talk and really enjoying it, and the beautiful images. Thank you for your presentation. And I've also been enjoying seeing the team from This Humid House starting to develop the installation. And we're at NDC and Design Singapore, we're really excited to to have this installation joining the Garden Dreaming exhibition and having it through to the end of our exhibition run to the end of May. So thank you for this.
Thank you. And thank you for having us. We're so excited. Okay, on to this.
So we'll just have a casual discussion as the team works on the installation, and also for the benefit of our audience, we'd love to take your questions in the Q&A module of Zoom. So please do add your questions there and we'll try and answer them as we go. So John, let me first ask you, what does it mean to be a botanical design studio as opposed to a floral design studio?
That's a really good question. Well, I feel like we arrived at botanical design studio for lack of a better word. I felt like floral design studio didn't really encapsulate everything that we did. We use a variety of material, not just flowers. We've extended that to anything that is perhaps or was living, including like natural material like rocks and wood and all of those things. Also, we have a tremendous range or spectrum of products and services. So we apply living media literally to anything from a small bouquet to landscape design. And I felt like a botanical design studio really encapsulated that. Also, we have an emphasis on design thinking, criticality in design, design as sort of a problem-solving approach. And for all these reasons, we've called it a botanical design studio.
That's exactly why we were keen to collaborate with you for this installation, for the innovative quality of the work that you're doing, which was completely evident in the presentation you gave just now. So that's what we tried to capture in this exhibition, Garden Dreaming, the innovative potential of marrying vegetation with our urban environment and the great potential that can come from that.
Absolutely, and I think that Singapore has been such a pioneer in doing this, and it's something that our team is incredibly proud of.
So, could you tell us about your design process? Because I think that's probably what everyone would love to know about. How long does it take for you to create an installation from the R&D to the completion? What's the thinking process?
Well, I think we have a good slide there that encapsulates what I'm going to say. In fact, maybe more comprehensively than I remember it. Okay, so our design process is not often linear. It can come from anything, I would say, but there are a lot of factors involved with design. And I think this diagram really encapsulates it. So I think there are a lot of forces involved in the design direction. Some of which is like, for example, if we were designing for a venue or a space, or even a piece of land, for example. There's the architecture, there are proportions, there's like the sequence through a space perhaps, and even like the narrative that we're trying to get to. There's the client, their intentions, their desires, their expectations, and then obviously there's constraints with budgets, seasonality. Seasonality is a big one. I mean, a lot of the times we're designing for events that are in a different period, and we really need to know what's available then and design to that. And also time. A lot of times with weddings and venues, events, we don't have a lot of time. When you cut something off a stem, it's when the clock starts to tick. And so time is really something that we have to work with. Yeah. And so going back to design process, it can really start from anything. And so actually, this is super relevant to talk about the design process of how we arrived at what we're doing today. And we were so happy early on to have Gardens by the Bay on board. And so we went on a recce to Gardens by the Bay. And this is the very first thing that caught our eye. It's incredible. It's the flowers from a bromeliad. And it's got this pink sheath that unveils like a shaft.
It's a really incredible juxtaposition, isn't it?
It's incredible, yeah. And I think if the camera could pick up on the colors here, it really there's a bit of an ultraviolet tinge to it, and an avatar quality to this. So we really wanted to almost build the colors around this, what I would call the star of this piece. And then from then on, we knew that we wanted to create something that that felt tropical as well. So these philodendron leaves came in. And in terms of a color palette, we can never we can't get the dragon fruit out of our heads. It's such an interesting fruit. A lot of people don't realize that dragon fruit come from a cacti. And the appearance of the dragon fruit plant looks like a lot of the epiphytes that grow all around Singapore. And so it's a game of weird association that brought us here basically. And we have a weakness for interesting fruit. Pineapples, also from the bromeliad family, have this electric pink that we really wanted to highlight. And of course, these caladium, watermelon caladium, with these colors that look actually fake. And so,
but it's a really nice marriage with our visual identity of the exhibition as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is coral, and what would you describe the color as?
Yeah, coral and deep green.
Deep green, yeah. Deep green, yeah. Okay, so a little bit about what we're doing here. So out of this nest of plumeria branches, I think the team has, correct me if I'm wrong, team. It looks like a real gesture, like the first gesture with caladium leaves, right? And I think what's really important is, and I can see here that they've tried to create this kind of sense of scale by putting the small elements in the back and coming up and radiating towards the larger elements. And they've done something like in a kind of a swirling gesture. I think it's important for us for something to have direction, but we're very conscious about not making things appear too stylized. I think naturalism is really important in our practice, but we're not tied to that as well. And sometimes the point is to subvert naturalism. Like I said, this installation is inspired by epiphytic communities and epiphytic habits, but this is, caladiums are in no way epiphytic. And for example, what you see here are actually the immature fruit from the rambutan,
really?
which really looks like chestnuts. And so we're playing off all these associations to create something that feels a little bit more complex and sophisticated.
And I can see that there are some tubes of water for some of the plants.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've had so many questions already coming into the chat, and a couple of them are about how long your installations tend to last, but I guess it's going to depend on what you're using.
Sure, absolutely. It really depends on how long it's supposed to last. So we've created installations that, have only lasted 10 to 15 minutes, which is sometimes the duration of a solemnization. And with that, we can take tremendous risks. We can use material that will not last cut. So we can cut them and put them in and not have a water source for them. And we've done incredible work for events with that short of a duration. For events that last, or if the installation's meant to last longer, we know that, for example, cut cacti would last a long time, and sometimes even for the duration of a month. So it really varies, yeah. We have a variety of techniques and mechanics to preserve the life of certain ingredients. For example, all the caladium here are individually attached to water tubes, and that allows them to be placed anywhere. For example, this Medellina magnifica here, which I will get a close-up of later because it's so incredible. It's bagged and in their root balls. And the caladium, we got a little bit lazy, so we're just chucking them in their pots right into the installation. So absolutely a variety of sources for them. I would expect that the caladium will expire first. And with this installation that is going to be up for a couple weeks, what we're going to do after this is maybe remove the most sensitive material and organize it so that whatever's remains will last for a long period of time. Yeah.
Thank you for that. We look forward to enjoying it in the National Design Centre Gallery. So we're grateful to Gardens by the Bay for partnering this time with some of the materials that you're using, but typically where do you source your materials from?
We source our materials from all over. On the front line are our floral suppliers, and they get their material anywhere from anywhere around the world. A large chunk of the material comes from Holland, which is the center of the floral trade. But a lot of other material, and what we're heading towards, or what we're trying to limit ourselves to actually, is regional material. And a lot of this comes, lovely orchids coming from Taiwan, the best material coming from Japan, of course, from Malaysia, from Thailand, from Vietnam, from the region. And we are partial to this material because also it gets trucked in with with a smaller carbon footprint. Also, some of this material we grow ourselves, and some of this material we are foraged by our contractors. We have a lot of contacts with contractors with private landscape contractors, and some of them actually allow us to forage freely on their land.
Here's a question from the audience. Do you ever work with invasive species?
Absolutely. So one of the things we love using is acacia. And acacia is an incredibly invasive tree. It has weak stems for branches, and it's always like a falling hazard. But acacia also lasts a long time even out of water, and it's been a great foliage for events.
Okay, let me ask you, we were just talking about carbon footprint of imported materials. So in general, is this type of work a sustainable practice? I think obviously by selecting materials locally, you're overcoming a lot of that concern.
For sure.
Could you talk about that?
I would like to emphasize that what we're doing is more sustainable. Primarily, as someone given life on this earth as a human being, we are expending and using resources. So it's not in any way beneficial, I would say, what we're doing to the environment per se. But I think with all the things that we do, we are really trying to close in on that carbon footprint and make that as small as possible. Be it avoiding the use of like plastics, avoiding the use of floral foam, for example, which is non-biodegradable, sourcing most of our material locally, and also even using a lot of plants in our exhibitions that we nurture back to health. Yeah.
And how's the appetite for local plant materials?
I would hope that it's growing. I think when we first started off, there wasn't really a consciousness or desire to use that. And I think we've presented them in ways that perhaps have jolted people into seeing its potential. For example, the use of Bougainvillea, which we use quite extensively. It's got this beautiful kind of papery-like quality that we want to emphasize in a lot of our work. And we do that specifically by taking the time to strip it of all its leaves. And a lot of the times, clients who said like, no, I don't want to use Bougainvillea would be really shocked at its similarity to cherry blossoms at some point.
Quite a few questions are coming in about what you do with the materials after an installation. Do you recycle them? And you just mentioned you can rehabilitate some. For sure.
So we do, there's a range of things we do with them. For some of our weddings, we've actually partnered with Refresh Flowers, and they're a nonprofit group that takes flowers that are used in weddings and then repurposes them for charitable organizations, people in hospice, people in old folks' homes, and they do wonderful work, and it's led by a friend, Olivia. We also, for large-scale weddings, put the material, the living material back in compost. It's not organic compost, it's industrial landscape compost, but that goes back to compost. We are actually in the midst of organizing a program where we're able to actually compost most of the material. Again, it won't be organic because a lot of the material we have a lot of imported material contains pesticides, and we can't put that in organic compost. And we reuse a lot of our material. For example, if we use like branches for events, it's stripped of its foliage and then it's used for structure, for example. And then obviously what we can't reuse will go to the bin. Yeah.
Somebody has commented how fantastic that is to hear. Let me just change direction a little bit. I'd like to talk about your background, which is actually in architecture. You studied and practiced architecture. So how has that influenced the way you approach your work now?
I think, well, architecture is in my blood. I mean, like, I've lived it, I breathed it, like it's my first love. And, it's really, I think it's really taught me how to read a space. A lot of the time, in terms of the design process, when we're designing for an event, we would do a site visit. And I think a lot of the times the space would speak to us. It actually tells us how big something needs to be to make a visual impact, or like the proportion. It tells us the proportion that an installation needs to be, for example. Like, sometimes when you have a tall, narrow space, the most predictable thing might be to go upwards, but sometimes something super low actually helps to exaggerate the height of the space. So it really depends. So I think reading a space is really important. At the same time, too, an understanding of structure has been incredibly important. I think with my background, we've really been quite fearless in hanging things and suspending things off things and creating and understanding the idea of a foundation for structure and support, like this nest is. That's been helpful. Yeah.
So I understand that your team members actually come from quite a diverse range of backgrounds as well, from fine art, architecture, floristry, landscape design. Sure. So what's the common language that binds you all together?
I think we all have an emotional resonance with the material that we work with. There is some crying on this team. Sometimes when we make something and it's really made an impact, but this is the best part, even when a colleague makes something, we've actually wept at how beautiful something is. And I think that really ties it all together. That makes it really worth it. A lot of the work that we do, like 90% of the work we do is sweat and almost like blue collar labor. And the making part is actually a very short, very small component of everything that it takes to make something. And you need that emotional payload for it to even, for it to be worthwhile. Yeah. Okay,
I want to swing back to the title of this session, which is Appropriating Nature for Pleasure. Sure. Why appropriating?
I think I chose the word because it really is a provocation. I think I think we have a lot to thank Ikebana for example. Ikebana is the Japanese art of floral arrangement. And the translation for that in Japanese, Ikebana, means the way of flowers, right? Which sounds very natural. But Ikebana is like everything that isn't natural. I mean, it is taking things from nature and putting them and gathering them in a way that feels natural, but really isn't. And there are a lot of techniques in Ikebana, for example, splitting stems, putting things in things, like to arrive at a single product. So I want to avoid this idea that when you make something or you make a floral installation that somehow things need to feel natural. What you're really doing is appropriating or manipulating all this living material as media to do something. So the word appropriating is absolutely intentional, and that there's incredible volition and intention in what you're doing, and that it's not always pretty. I mean, flowers are, if you look at the type of products and material that's available today, a lot is actually done to flowers, for example, dyeing them, preserving them. And I would say that is really an extension of appropriating living material. I would also like to equally emphasize the part about pleasure. And I think that a lot of the times, I think all of us in our own practices, our own personal journeys, really remember what it's like to fall in love with an ingredient, and then try to find something to do with it. And I think that's incredibly important. And like it's incredibly important that we don't forget it. I think sometimes we're so busy that we lose that first touch with that first love.
So is there a connection here back to the plant blindness that you were talking about before?
Absolutely. I think that plant blindness occurs to everyone. I mean, even us. And it's taken years, for example, for us to like really see things. It's funny. For example, rambutan trees are actually all around Singapore, but not a lot of people actually know what form it comes in. Mangoes maybe a bit more obvious, but rambutans maybe not so. Even like this epiphytic communities that I'm talking about, like I think so many times like I'll be wowed by what I see, and then I'd be next to a friend, and they wouldn't be looking at it. And when I bring their attention to it, like, oh, wow, that's really amazing. So it really is about sensitizing yourself to what's around you. Yeah.
I tell you, the questions are really rolling in from our audience, so I'm going to try and get to some of these. A quick recap of what
I'm just going to move these things around so I can move around the installation a little bit better. Okay, yeah.
So somebody just wanted to know again, what kind of branches are you using here?
So these branches are Plumeria. Plumeria is commonly known as frangipani. And we love them because, well, this particular species of Plumeria is super curvaceous, and like, if you can look at it, it looks like woolly mammoth tusks. The one thing about this species of Plumeria is that it's extremely weak stem. So if you see this, it snaps super easily. So we've done a little bit of voodoo here by adding the branches of Baphia. So Baphia is actually a very common shrub that's actually used to shield garbage bin centers around because it forms a very solid hedge. But it also has incredibly strong branches, and that's actually the internal structure of this nest that has actually supported and pushed out all of this stuff here. And when we came to do a site visit, Narelle, I think when we first saw this mesh, we were like, yes, we have to do a wall installation because there's so many points to attach to. And we really capitalized on that. Yeah, also, point to take, we were very thrilled to use Plumeria branches because if you can see the lichen that's growing on the branches, it has this kind of silverish quality that really matched the mesh. And even though we were creating the idea of the nest was really to form a kind of gesture that, you know, if you took a pen and you like kind of made multiple squiggle lines, building a mass with lines, it's what we tried to do. But we also wanted to like kind of blend it to the background so that all this material would have a chance to pop out. And so that's also why we chose the area. Yeah.
Do you make organic installations for climate sensitive people? Have you ever been asked that?
Absolutely. So I think that's not very difficult to achieve. I think I would say that most of what we do in our garden is raised without industrial pesticides. I wouldn't qualify it as completely organic, but it is pretty close to there. And if we made an installation for you from our garden, it might qualify as organic.
So is your garden, is it on ground level or is it elevated?
It's on ground level, okay. Yeah.
What's the rarest plant you've got in your garden?
So this is a good question. So I recently acquired frankincense.
Oh.
Yeah, the plant collector had a cutting from Africa, and I have it. And it's incredibly fragrant. The bark produces the kind of resin that when you scrape off, it smells just insanely amazing.
Okay. Do you think, this is another audience question, do you think that there is a high botanical design and mainstream botanical design? And if there's a distinction, would you make it when you're positioning yourself?
Yeah, I would say there definitely is a distinction. And I think the distinction is mostly aesthetic. It's based on so many factors. I mean, like, I think one of the most problematic words that for me is actually the word luxury.
Well, it means something, it's beginning to mean something so different these days.
For sure. Yeah. That is a problematic word. And it's interesting because a lot of our clients, a lot of the weddings we do are fairly elaborate. But I wouldn't call the look of what we do luxurious in a way. I think it's very interesting, it's very full, but it may not be luxurious. So it really depends on the client and what that means. And with aesthetics as well, it's incredibly subjective. So I wouldn't say for sure, like, if I could answer that question confidently, yeah.
Someone would like to know what made you leave architecture and start This Humid House, and would you expand into the architectural realm? I guess in a way you're doing that through your landscape work.
Sure. So I will never stop being an architect, I think. I think the way that I think, what I'm drawn to, I'm always looking at buildings. I always have ideas in my back pocket. I get inspiration from architecture, so I don't feel I've ever left it. I'm going to just draw attention to this here. It's the Calabash Tree. Sorry, Francoise. And we have to thank Gardens by the Bay for it. Its flesh is actually poisonous. We have someone from the National Parks Board say that it's an old wives' tale, but people used to take it so that they could get an abortion. But we've chosen it because, number one, it's super cute. It has this cannonball cartoonish-like quality to it. And sometimes we like to play with the idea of cuteness. And I think, the caladium leaves themselves already take on this kind of cartoonish quality. There are a lot of colors here that have a kind of vibrant, almost like cartoonish quality too. So it made sense to ask for a request for this fruit as well. Yeah. Beautiful, perfect. Okay. Are there any questions for the team?
Oh, most of them are directed at you, John.
Okay.
Do you plan on expanding the practice or conducting workshops throughout the Southeast Asian or Asian region in general?
That would be amazing. No plans yet, but that would be amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
How about are you looking to expand into areas that are not so humid?
Actually, we have some news coming up that's, we'll release that when the time comes for it.
Okay, you heard it here first.
Yes.
So on your process, and maybe this is one that the team could help you answer, is the design drawn out beforehand? Is it a freestyle drawing? Are you using software to draw?
Sure. I think all of us have become very good scribblers. So I think oftentimes we will do a sketch for sure. And the initial sketch is always it's kept very loose, very abstract. It's almost like a gestural line. And the benefit of that really is to get a sense of volume and scale. And that's the first move. When we draw, and that can be done with a pen. I think the team is getting very well versed with the iPad as well and drawing on the iPad. What is the tool, the software that you use? Procreate. In Procreate, you can use brushes that can introduce textures and give you the kind of feathery quality. So I think every and for example, Karina has incredibly detailed drawings where the flowers are articulated. And then for me, it's always a scribble. And then for Francoise, it's almost always airy. So everyone has their own style of drawing. Yeah. So there's no one way that flowers are represented, which is also an interesting issue. I mean, architecture representation is such a huge issue. And I think we're only scratching the surface of what it means to do visualizations for botanical installations, for example.
So what do your clients like to see if you've been commissioned?
Most of clients like full-scale, photo quality renders. And we don't really have the capacity to do that, nor do I think it's beneficial because it really ties our hands in something that is so incredibly subjective. And so we humbly offer them the scribble or the sketch.
So does an installation evolve as you're making it?
100%. I think one of the key qualities of everyone on the team is that we're not precious. We may be precious some ideas, but when we're presented with some material and things are not working, it's time to change tacks. And so a lot of things evolve. And that's also why we don't want to be tied to a form of representation that's overly realistic because that ties us down to some things. For example, I think we were very thrilled by the idea of using a lot of this epiphyllum, but it really just wasn't, it was really appearing very dull against all these branches, and we've decided to really reduce the amount of epiphyllum that we're using. So this is done on the fly. This caladium's not doing well, we may just get rid of it or not. I think we can get rid of it from the spots. Yeah, so I mean, we really have to adapt to the realities of working with living media. Yeah.
Who influences your work? And the person asking says, including sculptors, landscapers, designers, etc.
I think there are almost too many to mention, I would say. We're very influenced by like fine art. Sometimes I would send the team even like a dance move, which has an odd gesture, and I'm like, I really like that. So it's really from all over. can be from photography, furniture design. So it's really too many to mention. I think there, for sure, there's a whole gamut of like florists and floral designers that we've been drawn to. Constance Spry, for example, was a real pioneer spirit. She has an ongoing exhibition now at the Garden Museum in London. There's also Emily Thompson in New York, who really expanded my ideas as to what like a vision for the tropics could be like.
Somebody answered exactly that.
Okay, for sure. And I think this is such an exciting time for botanical and floral design. The gates are wide open. Like so many personalities are allowed to really shine through. And this is the time where like, you really understand that living media is now just a form of like a medium for expression, basically.
And in Singapore, is that equally true as in other countries? I mean, that's I guess this sensitivity to the natural world is something that we tried to draw out in the Garden Dreaming exhibition, and the potentials that can come with integrating greenery into the urbanscape, which
for sure
is a what?
I mean, I think the Singaporean experience is incredibly interesting. I mean, in some ways, the amount of greenery around us is really a result of like social and environmental engineering and policies that favor that, right? And so we are the beneficiaries of that, for example. So the nature that we see around us isn't exactly in a hinterland. It's not in a forest or, well, there are protected areas, but like on the streets, for example. So the nature that we see around us, it's kind of like scripted, but at the same time, given room to look wild enough that it gives the impression of like an untamed kind of spirit. And we can actually see that when you go to the Book Tima or like any of the, even McRitchie, you can see like nature kind of like unbounded, and also you see wild boars, which really adds to the atmosphere. But what I would say is that even like being in the army, for example, for guys, and like having to go out to the jungles and experience that firsthand is an incredibly valuable experience. We're not, holed up in air-conditioned rooms, for example. I think that interaction with like nature is just like so important and so key. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we think there's a deepening sensitivity and
for sure.
Increase, along with the new mandate of City and Nature from NParks. There's definitely, I think, from my point of view, a growing sensitivity towards a more naturalized nature in the city, which I think a lot of people really enjoyed during the COVID lockdown as well, as we saw the wilder weeds growing and so on.
Absolutely, yeah. Our team, we're just delighted by what was allowed to grow during that period.
Yeah. A lot of people want to know what you look for when you hire floral designers.
Carol, I'd like you to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone has to say one thing. Carol.
I think for me, I always.
My mic is here. So.
My first question would be how ready they are with their hands. I tend to always look for someone who comes up to me and goes, I want to make my hands are your hands. That's the most important and valuable thing.
Yeah, I think facility with even just a connection. I asked them, what do you do with your hands? And even cooking is helpful. Because not only with your hands, but also flavor profiles, understanding complexity, all these things are important. Francoise, what would you say? What do you look for when you're hiring a floral designer? You have to come here because my mic is here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's first, it's a lot of flexibility. I would say it's all about. Of course, the eyes, but I would say it's flexibility, and really to like the challenge, to always get better. It's. I would say we.
Flexibility, and for you, intelligence. As well, she doesn't suffer fools. And Karina?
Actually, I was going to say the same thing as I was going to say resilience.
Resilience, yeah.
And also because you have to think on your feet. Things don't always go the way you think they're going to go.
Do you think the audience can hear? Do you think? Is that? Yeah. Okay.
And also, John mentioned it before. It's almost like conceptual thinking, being able to walk into space and think about what we're going to do.
Spatial
awareness.
Spatial awareness. Yeah. Okay. Spatial intelligence, is that a thing? Yeah.
Willingness to get dirty.
The willingness to get dirty. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, this is not glamorous.
We're getting close to the end of the session, but
Sure.
there's so many questions coming in. So honestly, I don't know how to choose.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah. Blocking. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm gonna pop over here.
Okay, there's a couple about how the team works together.
Sure.
So everyone seems to be working very fluidly, not needing to talk to each other. Do you pre-plan what you're doing, or is it that you just have a rhythm together?
Well, I feel like there's definitely a synergy, but this is people working together almost every day for years. And this is what you see here. But I think even at the start already, I mean, like we have a good sense for like team dynamics, right? And what people naturally quite like fall into. And I've been very blessed to have a team that just like comes together like a jigsaw puzzle. Like, you know, I'm weak in some areas and someone picks up after me, and someone may have a blind spot and like, you know, and the person is that, for example. And then we are relentless in our postmortems. And so then we just discuss as a team, like how can we improve? Why do I feel this way? I don't even know why. And then we try to pick it apart. So yeah, no, this is a super close situation.
So how will you all know when you've reached the finishing point on this installation?
Oh, that's actually one of the best questions ever. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to stop. Yeah, I am always accused of putting too much in. It's interesting. I always like playing with the line between the feeling of too much. It's like when you eat something that's very rich and it's like right in the line of like, oh, this is amazing, and also a little bit too much. So I like my thrill is really to like toe that line to a lot of people's annoyances, like stop. Okay, let's talk about this right now. Is it time to stop? 1 second. I think if we had more time, we'd like go on refining it. Like I feel like we haven't put the most important element here, which is, well, we have one of that too. I think Carol's thinking about where she wants to put the second one. So I think in terms of principles, I can see where the team is going. Look, I've not really been paying attention to what's been going on, but you can see here a real concentration of pink elements here, a real grouping of them. Okay, a real grouping of the pink elements here, which are grouped for emphasis so that from farther back, it makes a bit more of a visual impact. There is a kind of a nice blend of the fluttering leaves of the of the caladium and the anthuriums, the lily pad anthuriums. You know, and then there is like the specific elements that we want to show off, like the medellina here and the bromelia flower that's sticking out here. So I can see where the team is going with this, and there's a real kind of sensitivity to the original movement of the branches that they've tried to preserve. So yeah, absolutely. We would, if we had more time, continue refining this, but I already see the main gestures here and they're working for me. So this works.
So an interesting question, has the COVID crisis affected your approach and the evolution of your work in any way? And do you think the industry will be changed going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I think it really quickened for us a lot of the main kind of like the main drives or driving factors for why I started doing what I was doing. It's always been my dream to grow the material that I'm using. And so COVID just quickened that in a way. And I think a lot of the values we had were inherently sustainable values. And COVID just almost like really quickened that process for us. Yeah.
There's still so many more questions and only a couple more minutes in our clock.
Okay.
But perhaps if for the questions we can't get to, perhaps you'll be open to
I think it's like two. So same thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
answering them after this session.
For sure.
Through text. That's great.
It's like two like this.
So to our audience who we can't answer your question, then please do keep a lookout and we'll let you know the answers a bit later. So we've got time for 2 more questions, I'm being told. So how to choose? how do you feel about rewilding, and how do you balance manicured, stylized, and recreating as natural as possible? And talk about the relationship of humans with nature.
Wow, that's like a complex question. Like, can we take that in parts?
Yeah. Okay, how do you feel about rewilding?
If I'm not wrong, rewilding is allowing certain parts to be taken over naturally by nature without intervention. Is that generally what it is, or?
Well, according to one of our interviewees in this garden dreaming exhibition, it's yes, there's that, but it's also about strategic maintenance. So it's not.
Oh, I see.
The wilded area doesn't become a disamenity.
Yeah, we are 100% for that. I think things just look more interesting when they're given time, like room to grow. I also understand the practicalities of a national parks board, where maintenance is a huge issue, and that like maintenance cost is an issue. So you would then want to trim something down as much as possible so that it, the length between each maintenance would be lengthened. So I think a good balance is important, but I am absolutely for rewilding if by that definition. Was there the second part to that question?
Oh, I already answered it.
Okay.
About the relationship between humans and nature. I guess the point is, how do you encourage a deeper relationship?
I think the main gist of what the main thrust of what we're trying to talk about today is really about like just noticing stuff, right? More, and I think that's the first way of entry into developing that relationship. Just noticing what's around you. It's also the first way of developing a better relationship with people. Noticing them. So seeing is perhaps the most important tool you would have in your relationship with nature. And it's really being quite intentional about it. Yeah. Get those books.
Yes, somebody did ask for the titles. I also have a copy of 1001 Garden Plants in Singapore.
That's absolutely essential.
I have to confess, it's very much less thumbed through.
Okay.
Okay, let's finish on this question, and hopefully we can encapsulate the thinking behind this installation and the exhibition as well.
Okay.
What would be a dream project for you or a dream client?
I feel like we've had a lot of projects that, for example, I think Sayang Sayang last year at the Esplanade was just such a dream for us. Like, never thought that we'd be doing something on that scale. I've kept the idea of a sarong rocker in the back of my mind. I've been always like weirdly interested in these mechanisms throughout childhood, or even my later years, and to be able to use that on that scale was just like incredible. And like for that, specifically for a Southeast Asian audience, where that mechanism perhaps is like a common, and to use that in that exhibition was just like a total dream. So I feel like a lot of our dreams have come true. And even working with the material every day, sometimes I pinch myself that this is my job, while other days not so. But
what happens on those days?
When the going gets tough, yeah, it is tiring.
Yeah, it's mental and physical and emotional, as you were saying earlier.
Absolutely, mental, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual energy.
That's the way all good creative practice
should
be.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're...
Oh, wait, I have to talk about this dragon fruit.
Yeah,
so we couldn't find a dragon fruit plant that was fruiting. So this is what I mean by appropriating. We bought dragon fruit and we stuck it on dragon fruit stems that were not fruiting. So we're simulating what it is like, but it's also a little bit perverse that we've done this. And it's also kind of jarring. I mean, like we're, very few people know where dragon fruit comes from and what it looks like. And we really tried to emphasize that in this installation here. Yeah. Okay, I think we're done. Team, what do you think? Almost. And no one's ever really happy.
I think we should have all of the This Humid House team come together to say farewell.
Absolutely. Yeah, come. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It's such a pleasure that our work gets the attention it does. We never take it for granted. And we want to thank everyone for their support. We want to thank Design Singapore and the National Design Center for their support. I want to thank Gardens by the Bay for the donation of material. And we feel very blessed to be doing what we do. So thank you.
And it's been a great pleasure for us to host you here. And thank you for this installation. We look forward to enjoying it in the future. Thanks to all of the team. Thank you to Gardens by the Bay. And to everyone, thank you for your questions that flooded into the Zoom Q&A module. We'll try and get to the rest of them. And do come down and check out the installation and the rest of the exhibition at the National Design Centre. Thank you so much. And I'll hand back to Felicia for the closing statement.
Thank you so much once again to John, the team from This Humid House, Narelle, and to all of you for joining us today. If you would like to see This Humid House's installation in person and learn more about Singapore's growth from a garden vision, do visit the Garden Dreaming exhibition at the National Design Centre, which is ongoing till 31st May. And before you go, we would really appreciate it if you could take some time to share your feedback through a quick survey by scanning the QR code you see on the left. A link to the survey can also be found in the Zoom chat right about now. And if you'd like to find out more about the upcoming programs the National Design Centre has lined up under the April-May thematic of Casting Hope, do scan the QR code that you see on the right. This Humid House will be joining us for another online event in May, where they will demonstrate how to create your very own botanical stylings with forage materials. More details will be released on that soon, so do follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you'd like to stay in the loop. Thank you once again for spending time with us tonight, and we hope to see you at our future events. Goodbye.